Hey guys, this is Dante at Ferrigno Freedom Channel. I want to welcome you back for another reaction video. This is going to stray a little from my normal trail in a way because the title doesn't indicate any way to me that this has anything to do with carnivore. But a friend of mine who checked this video out, who's been doing carnivore for a while, reached out to me and said that I should give this a look and possibly do a reaction to it. So I said, hey, you know, it's a little different than the norm, but you never know till you shake things up. So we'll give this a try. This is my buddy Sam back here. He's a carnivore too. Say hi, Sam. Oh, he's asleep. Are you asleep, Sam? He's a good boy. I'll tell you, he's something else. He joined me on a walk one day about 2 years ago, and he's been by my side ever since. Love that dog. All right, so this show is called The Truman Show Tried to Warn You. Now, I've seen The Truman Show, and I see some of the parallels between The Truman Show and, say, The Matrix in a way of showing how our reality has been affected in a certain way by what we're fed, and clearly that was his situation. If you haven't seen The Truman Show, you may want to watch it before you watch this video, but, you know, there's a lot of people out there that are familiar with it, so I'm assuming you may have already seen it, and if you have, then maybe you'll find some enjoyment in this too. He told me that while he was watching this, living his life as a carnivore, he feels some of the same things that the person who's presenting this information breaks down for you. It relates to everything going on in our lives right now. And since my show is about lifestyle, it is about living healthier physically, mentally, and spiritually, that really kind of encapsulates every area of our life in a way. And he said that this kind of covers that every area of our life mentality too. So let's give it a shot. Let me get my headphones on. All right, ready to roll. Let's get started.
The Truman Show is one of my favourite movies. It's incredibly rare for a film to be as funny, cohesive, beautifully paced and rich in detail as The Truman Show. However, it's even rarer for a movie to go beyond this and give accurate prophetic insights about the world. 20 years later, and The Truman Show's allegorical message is more relevant than ever. But the only way we can truly understand its meaning is by diving into the story. The film begins with a monologue from Christoph, who sets up the main premise of the movie. Truman is the unwitting star of a reality TV show centered around his life. Truman, a child abandoned at birth, has been brought up to believe that he is a normal guy living in the idyllic town of Sea Haven Island. However, Truman's entire world is a lie. All the people he knows, including his mother, his best friend, and his wife, are all paid actors. Sea Haven Island is also fake, and is in reality just a huge set enclosed by a massive dome. This gives Christoph, the director of The Truman Show, almost complete control over Truman's world. This ranges from the ability to control the weather, to the day-night cycle, and even the stars in the sky. Truman's every moment is broadcast around the world, with extra funding from the show coming from product placement. From the start of the film, we see a camera implanted in Truman's bathroom mirror, where Truman is pretending to be an explorer whilst getting ready for work. It's as though this is just another regular day for Truman, with him saying hello to his neighbours, making a coffee, and getting into his car. But just as he's getting into his car, a stage light drops from the sky right onto the road outside of his house. Truman then walks over to inspect the light and sees that it says Sirius on it, referring to the brightest star in the night sky. But eerily, on his drive to work, the radio starts to run a story about a plane wreckage falling from the sky in order to explain the light.
Here's a news flash just then. An aircraft in trouble began shedding parts as it flew over Sea Haven just a few moments ago.
It then starts to talk about the dangers of flying, which is one of the first of many subtle ways that Christoph tries to influence Truman into staying on the island through fear. He is being subconsciously controlled by the radio. This subconscious manipulation then continues throughout the film. Like when Truman is asked by his boss to deal with something that will require a boat trip. By doing this, the boss is setting up Truman's aquaphobia, as we see he is unable to even get in the boat. A phobia that's later revealed to be another subconscious manipulation of Truman. This whole day feels very strange for Truman, so he hurriedly comes back to his wife Meryl, who then conspicuously shows off her new kitchen tool that she bought at the store, showing it off almost like she's advertising it.
It's a dicer, grater, peeler all in one. Never need sharpening, dishwasher safe.
Truman becomes suspicious, and when out with his best friend Marlon, Truman's behavior starts to be off, and he brings up his desire to leave and go to Fiji. Marlon catches that Truman is starting to wake up, so he quickly shoots down the idea. He doesn't want Truman escaping. That would break the whole game. In the next scene, we see Truman go off to spend some time on the beach, where he remembers the tragic boat accident that seemingly killed his father and gave him his aquaphobia. Christoph then even heightens Truman's misery by adding a specific path of rain to follow Truman, and with Truman's breakdown growing, we see the audience's engrossed reactions. It's all these early scenes that serve to illustrate that the fictional Truman Show can only function when Truman buys into this false reality. The Truman Show, therefore, has to make sure that Truman can't escape his cage, or even see that he's in a cage. If he knows that he's in a cage, the whole game collapses. The ways that Christoph keeps Truman deluded are the most striking aspects of the allegory. The most obvious and egregious of these is how Truman is kept complacent by exploiting his deepest fears. For example, Truman's aquaphobia works.
Gosh, yeah, I can already see a lot of correlations here to some of the things that come to mind when you're eating a carnivore way of eating, and any of your friends or family or doctors or just about anybody you talk to about it, no matter how good you're doing from it, how good your results are, how good you feel, how much medicine you've gotten rid of, how much weight you lost, it doesn't seem to matter. The narrative stays the same. They stick with what we've been fed, the way Truman's been fed all of this information. You know, just like we're, if you've done any research on where the idea that LDL cholesterol was bad for us is, just a little bit of scratching under the surface, and you realize that this was poorly done science, and there were companies behind the scenes that were pushing the people who were the scientists in the direction they wanted them to go because they wanted to be able to sell more product. Everything from the influence of the Seventh-day Adventist group that pushed with like Kellogg's and all that stuff, trying to get people to... I don't even want to get into what Kellogg was into. He is such a weird cat, but he was basically trying to change humans' mentality and physiology so that we would be less sinful, basically. And eating meat to him was considered a sin, and he was big on having large fibrous poops and weird things like that. But then you've got Ansel Keys taking the information that was done by the Russian scientist who worked with rabbits and basically fed them a high cholesterol, high fat diet for a while, and then noticed how it affected them in a negative way. Not even taking into account that rabbits eat vegetation. That's their natural diet. So putting an animal on an unnatural diet is going to have unnatural results. How you can correlate that to human eating, unless you already believe that humans were meant to eat vegetation to begin with, doesn't make any sense to me. But when you hear that Ansel Keys kind of ran with that same type of study in mind, and then you had support from companies like Procter & Gamble who made vegetable oils that we use for frying and all kind of things like that, that they were basically funding everything he was doing. And as a scientist, funding is hugely important for getting any type of study done. And when you start to take your personal biases into account and the fact that you need to get the funding and that you've got people willing to support your funding if it supports their outcome, then you can see how we moved in this direction on LDL. And then today, it's completely programmed in people to first think, oh, your LDL must be sky high. You must be having cholesterol issues. You're going to have cancer. You're going to have heart problems. You're going to have all these problems that have labeled red meat as being the cause, and it's just not true. As he's talking about how Truman is starting to wake up to these little realities, I remember watching Jordan Peterson before I first started doing this diet. He was kind of just saying things I already knew, but it was just nice to have somebody with his mental capacity that Jordan Peterson has come forth and say, yeah, you got to get up. You got to clean your room. You got to take care of those bills that are sitting on the table. You got to address these small problems. You got to start eating that elephant one bite at a time and stop avoiding the elephant in the room. You've got to take care of your issues. And he was sort of helping me get my mental attitude straight again. I mean, this was all late in 2020 when we were going through a lot of mental changes on our own because every one of us were affected by what was going on. And then I had on top of that the difficulties of running a retirement home during the situation that was happening. And it just made for a very difficult life. I was eating food that I had no idea was causing me so many problems. Then I heard Jordan Peterson asked by Joe Rogan about his all-beef diet. And because I had already had a lot of faith in the thinking process of a man like Jordan Peterson to hear his story and hear his daughter's story and find out about all the things that he had been able to heal on a ruminant meat, salt, and water diet like the lion diet, which is a form of carnivore diet. It just cuts out other meats that other carnivores eat, like pork and chicken and fish. Cheese is not on the diet. There's no dairy on lion diet. I've experimented with them, and they've all not been good for me. But when I heard him say that, I thought, what is this? I knew that low carb eating could have benefits. I had done Atkins before, and then I think I bought into all the noise that came from the media after that Atkins is not sustainable, it's not good for you, it's going to cause this problem and that problem in the long run. Then come to find out later on that all of that noise was being supported by companies who were losing their tails because people weren't buying their product anymore. And that's another parallel right there. So it's very interesting to hear how this correlates in a way to just the carnivore aspect of my life, but I can already see the other aspects of how we are dramatically affected by the radio. He was listening to the radio, looking at posters on the wall, listening to friends, and that's more on the carnivore side. But sometimes when it comes to the political aspects of our discussions, we realize that our friends lead us in certain directions that they haven't really even researched. They just have come to believe something, and they don't really have a strong foundation for what they believe, but they believe it innately, and they're going to repeat what they've heard from these same sources we're talking about, which a lot of us know. These mainstream sources and even some of the sources you can find here on YouTube, they're not telling you the truth. They're just telling you what their ideology is telling you. They're just telling you what they can get paid to tell you. Now, I don't think there's anything wrong with a YouTuber getting paid for whether it's products or something else that they're recommending, as long as they're really using that product. One of the things I hate is when I see a YouTuber come out and recommend something, I say, you're not playing that stupid game. I know you're not playing that game. I know you're not using that product because it doesn't fit you. It doesn't make sense that you would be using that product. So why are you recommending it? You're only recommending it for ad revenue. And that the segue away from what they're talking about into the product they're talking about sometimes have such a disconnect that it does cause a problem with me giving a lot of trust to that person anymore, even if what they're saying is good. Heck, there's some things that I've seen Jordan Peterson advertise where I'm like, But generally, he sticks to the script on that, like I do. I recommend products I use, like Redmond Smoked Salt. I use Carnivore Crisps. I love Carnivore Crisps. There's grills and things I've tried. I've got several companies that have sent me things to try for this Christmas. And, I don't get real excited about getting these things because I think to myself, if I don't like it, I don't want to have to deal with these people. And if I don't like it, I'm certainly not going to talk about it. And there's been many a product I've been sent that never even really got talked about on this channel. And I would be glad to send it back to them. So if any of you guys out there that sent me stuff to try that I didn't talk about, write me and I'll send it back to you, because if I'm not talking about it here, it's because I'm not using it, and I don't want to be out here bashing anybody's product either. I'd rather talk about things I actually believe in. So even the stuff where they were talking about product placement kind of hit home with me a little bit, being a YouTuber. But anyway, let's continue. This is a fairly long video.
To keep Truman on the island. Christoph even risks Truman overcoming this fear when he sends Truman to unsuccessfully board the boat. The fact that Truman can't overcome his phobia only reinforces this. Truman is also constantly barraged by propaganda and subliminal messages to induce a fear of flying. There are constant reminders of the dangers of flying. It takes this rampant fear-mongering to keep Truman's delusion alive. However, this time the propaganda starts to weaken. Truman still fantasizes about taking a flight to Fiji. His aquaphobia is still strong, but it's revealed that this is most likely because it originates from the undressed guilt over Truman's father's death. But it's not just the fear that influences Truman. The control that Christoph has over his world is total. Everything Truman takes in on a daily basis is designed with a secret purpose. The TV he watches reinforces the message. The media always has headlines directly promoting whatever they want Truman to believe. Even the people that Truman talks to on a daily basis spout the same canned lines and positive affirmations. Propaganda is seeping into every aspect of Truman's life and society.
You thinking of flying somewhere? Nope. Oh, good.
A lot like its infiltration of our society. Just like Truman, we're always bombarded with propaganda just to keep us complacently unaware of the delusions of modern ideology. Every day society tells us who we are, what we ought to do, and who our enemies are. Just like Truman, we're encouraged to ignore the clues that we're
That reminds me of why, exactly like I was saying, people who want to get in shape. I see a lot of people who talk about it. Some of the YouTubers I follow, like a sports guy on YouTube, was talking the other day about how he has this back issue, that he's got slip discs and some things going on. And one of the most important things he needs to do is get the weight off. He didn't say how much he weighed, but he's clearly, not metabolically healthy. And I reached out to him and offered him hey, I may have your solution, buddy, because what this has done for me, I was over 302 pounds at my highest, and now I'm walking around at 182 pounds, currently 7 pounds less than my lowest weight before that. When I was in high school as a grown man, I was 189 pounds. I was the same height I am now, and I had to work to get down to that weight in high school. So to be going around naturally at 182 pounds and feeling fantastic at 51 years old, feeling in many cases better than I did when I was 17 years old. I've got some aches and pains from being older, but in general, I have a zest for life I've never had before. And yet when I share this with people like that, even people who have expressed an interest, like a recent friend of mine who has cancer, he mentioned that he wants to go to a natural way of dealing with this. And I sent him some information, haven't heard a word. And I'm sure it has a lot to do with a lot of the biases that we have. We're told we need fiber. We're told that we shouldn't eat a lot of red meat. We shouldn't eat a lot of salt. I eat nothing but red meat. I eat tons of salt. I only drink water, which is a great benefit. I don't eat any ultra-processed garbage anymore. I have had my slip-ups, and I've used experiments to try some of those things, and they've always proven to be bad for me, so I just stick with what works. But I can understand why people don't want to change their routine to something that doesn't match what they've been told by everybody. The news, the television, their friends, people, it's just, they're bombarded with propaganda. It's a wonder we as a people are able to make any good decisions. I mean, I spent the first portion of my life making decisions based on this information, only to keep getting less healthy, fatter, sicker, more unhappy, dealing with anxiety and depression, and I had stomach issues, gut issues that were just about, I wanted to end my life. It was so bad at some points that it was so much pain and causing me so much more extra expense. Doctors were looking at me like I was crazy. I had low testosterone. All of these problems have gone away, and there's a number of other ones I've talked about in other videos. It all comes from the mindset that we get from all the propaganda that we see. We've got to be searching for the truth. I heard a quote that I shared on my Facebook page last night that basically says, the biggest barrier to the truth is thinking you already have it. And a lot of times people think they already know what they need to know about certain things, and they're closed to any new information that will open their eyes to what the truth is. It's a conundrum that we're all going to deal with, and it's one of those things that's hard to get around, and it's really hard on carnivores who are seeing all these benefits and seeing their loved ones and their friends suffering from the things that they used to suffer from, and yet they're not interested in the answer that they found. It's like finding the fountain of youth and taking it to your elderly friends and saying, hey, I found the thing that's going to make you feel better. It's going to heal all your problems. And they just look at you like you're crazy. And they come up with every argument in the world. And then on top of that, he talked about how his friends would be guiding him in a certain direction, or realize that you're breaking free from the matrix. It's almost kind of same mentality, that they see you getting healthy and they see that you've had to make a huge lifestyle change, but they're not willing to make that change. And they don't want you breaking free and doing it, because that means that they've got to do something. And that's a hard situation to be in, until you realize, when you go to the doctor and they say you've got fatty liver disease, you've got diabetes type 2, you've got cancer, you've got something that you need to make a change for, and then maybe they'll be receptive to those things. I know that's what it took for me, and that's what it takes for a lot of people. That moment when it comes, When Morpheus stands there with the red pill in one hand and the blue pill in the other, and he's offering you the truth, and you need the truth, you're hungry for the truth, you're starving for the truth, you're going to take that red pill. And the more people around that are there to offer that choice, the more of us that stick together in this community and talk about the benefits we've experienced and be honest. Don't hold back. Don't say you never cheat when you do cheat, because those are going to cause problems with you, and they're going to cause problems with your credibility. So anyway, I digress because we got to get moving.
In a lie, where we're made to still become wages in the matrix, and then everyone who buys into the societal delusion helps perpetuate it. This means that lots of well-meaning, rational people are swept up to become mouthpieces of a failing system. The cracks are present in both reality and fiction. They just exist solely on the personal level for Truman, rather than the societal level that we're starting to see. But what is the society-wide delusion? Well, in The Truman Show, it's obvious and literal. It's the premise of the movie. The Truman Show is a reality show. But how does this translate into our real world? Well, this is where it gets interesting. The habitus is a tool used by sociologists for describing the ways in which a society's culture functions. Society rests upon an enormous amount of unsaid rules and expectations. These are often performed without thinking about them. It's more like a learned skill than a conscious decision. Bourdieu, the French intellectual who brought the term to prominence, often compared it to sports. People tend to know the rules of the game. For example, it's generally accepted that when you're finished at the supermarket, you return your shopping cart. There's no personal reward or egotistic incentive, it's just a learned polite expectation. In the context of the supermarket though, it's very important. The whole system would collapse without it. Some abstracts of the habitus are nearly invisible because they seem so natural to us. Even your taste in music or food are influenced by the habitus. This is because the cultural expectations that the habitus instills go so deep. They're established from the moment you're born, reinforced throughout your childhood by your family, and then further built upon by your education and work. This then makes the habitus a self-perpetuating structure. Those brought up in certain habitus will nurture its specific values in their children, for example, making sure the cycle continues. The Truman Show gives a literal picture of what a habitus can look like. We can see all the actors in the fictional Truman Show as being sucked into this. The actors act in certain learned ways in order to perpetuate the essence of the Truman Show. Now, the key difference between fiction and reality is the incentive. Literally, the actors in the fictional Truman Show are being paid to play their parts, but in the real world, people play their parts in the habitus because the habitus itself has conditioned them into it. Everyone is one of the actors. Everyone makes the delusion real. And what the Truman Show goes on to tell us is that when the habitus has been altered into something too detached from an authentic society, cracks start to show, when lies start to perpetuate, when the ego gets in the way, when power corrupts, the habitus starts to break, and this ripples throughout entire civilizations. See, throughout the movie's progression, we see Truman gradually wake up to the delusion that has consumed his life, which inevitably causes a breakdown of the entire habitus. The further Truman moves towards truth, the faster the delusion collapses, and thus the more resistance he faces. The habitus of our world is just as deluded as the one in the Truman Show. This is because what's valuable culturally has been drastically changed by reality TV and social media. The Truman Show almost predicted this with its commentary on reality TV. The vapid values of reality TV expanded to shape the entire habitus. Now limited to reality TV, and this doesn't seem too harmful, but it gets so much worse when you consider this in our own reality, especially with the effects of social media on our values. Nowadays, everyone's the star of their own reality TV show. People project vapid and unattainable standards by advertising a fake life on social media.
That 14-year-old girls who use social media more than 5 hours a day saw a 50% spike in depression symptoms.
This feeds into people's values. They see other people's fake lives and hold their own up to the same standard. These people then perpetuate the cycle, which then brings the habitus further and further away from authenticity and truth. Corporatization of society is then also reflected in the habitus of both the Truman Show and in our own society. In the Truman Show, the effects are obvious. Truman's wife is constantly advertising and shitting brands. It's almost a learned response that has been ingrained into her.
You really ought to throw out that mower. Get one of those new elk rotaries.
Which is why at this point, Truman is actively interrogating her on the lie that they've been living. In response, Truman's wife defaults to an almost robotic speech about a coffee brand. This is the habitus failing. Truman's wife is so deeply submerged in the Truman Show delusion that she has no other response. She just keeps reading the same script. But it's so much worse in our own society where our habitus is so heavily corporatized, with corporate values being held in such a high regard that we value our careers more than our families. Never before in history has this happened. Truman's suspicions of reality are then brought up again when his father father, who he assumes is dead, shows up on his way to work dressed as a beggar.
Dad?
Truman's father is then quickly whisked away on a bus, but not before Truman sees his face. He realizes something is up, so he goes to talk to his mother, who tries to explain away his father's reappearance by suggesting that he's just crazy and hallucinated it. This time, it doesn't convince Truman, who also notices how often his wife name drops brands. As Truman starts to go through his old things, the movie flashes back to Truman's college years and a chance encounter he had with a woman named Lauren. Lauren's meant to be a background character, but the two sides meet across the room. They share a conversation in a romantic moment on the beach. Lauren then goes out of character to try to reveal to Truman that his whole reality is fake.
Listen to me. Everybody knows that. Everybody knows everything you do. They're pretending, Truman. Do you understand? Everybody's pretending.
Lauren, who reveals her real name as Sylvia, tries to explain that Truman's world is a lie, but then again she stops short by a man saying he is her father and that she's just talking nonsense. As Truman starts to think back to this, it's revealed that he still longs to see Sylvia, with him even recreating her face from fashion magazines, because
Few things I wanted to mention about what I saw there. One, the part where it talked about what we eat. There was a brief blurb where it just threw a hamburger up on the screen. And I remember thinking how every time I used to see certain commercials, like I was driving by the McDonald's the other day and I saw McRib is back for a short period of time. Boy, that used to be I'd turn right around and go in there and get at least two of them, one to eat right then and one to eat later, because that's just the way they get into your mind, and they grab you with subtle advertising techniques that they've used, like the idea that there's scarcity. You're going to not have a chance to get this. So you run back and you get it. But this is all planned. It's not like they only were able to find the rib meat, or not rib meat, but the pork that they use, because who knows what they're doing. I always think of the scene from The Simpsons when they took the whole cow, and even though it isn't pig meat, it isn't cow meat, it's pig meat, when they drop it into the vat and then they let the liquefied meat come down into a little ingot, shake like the ribs, and that's basically what we're getting, but that's one of the things that ever since I've been on this way of eating, as I've gotten away from having any interest in eating out at these restaurants or going and being responsive to these advertisements, they don't have that hold on me that it used to have. And that makes me more able to function freely within my life. But I'm still living within this reality, this Truman Show of a situation that we live in, where the news, whether I turn it on myself or not, it's somewhere. Whether I am at the airport, or I'm at a doctor's office, or at a dentist's office, or in a hotel lobby, or anywhere they have a TV on, a lot of times they're going to have the mainstream news on, and people are watching it and they're soaking it in and they're hearing all this information, and it's changing the way they think. And of course, all the advertisements are there for the stuff that they pay big money to be using. I've had companies that try to control the way that I present the information, or they want me to do this step and jump through this hoop and use this feature and go through Google Documents. And I'm like, dude, let me just talk about the product if I like it. And then you give me a link and a code. If people want what I'm buying, what I'm using, then they can buy it and order it. So I think it's different when you actually believe in what you're using. I do see all the problem with all this corporatist control of everything, because the melding of business and government between the food companies, the pharmaceutical companies, the big tech and media companies, all working together with the government, have us living in this Truman Show reality we're talking about right here. And then when you start to hear the information coming out from the United Nations, where they want to crack down on Western countries eating so much meat, they're trying to take it away. You listen to what Bill Gates wants to do, getting us all eating either bugs or digitally printed food or vegetable-based protein that's made to look like meat, because he wants to make you healthier and he wants to save the planet. That has nothing to do with his intentions or goals. He has intentions and goals that are very different than that, and they're all about him and his billionaire club buddies over at Davos and in the World Economic Forum, and those things are not, they're definitely not good for you. And that's my opinion. I have to say that on YouTube here, because unfortunately, a lot of the people on YouTube and Google don't appreciate the true freedom of speech that we should have. And I hope that changes. I would like to appeal to any of them listening now that you need to let people speak the truth, because people searching for the truth are going to find people who are speaking the truth. They're also going to find people who are saying things that are not true, or saying things that might be considered hate speech. And if you don't let people say those things, you don't give something for people to say, well, that's wrong, but that's right. And eventually people that are searching for the truth are going to find the truth if people are allowed to speak their mind. And if anybody listens to something I'm saying and says, oh, he's full of beans, turn it off. You don't have to watch me. That's the great thing. You have so many choices out there. You don't have to watch something that you don't believe in. But if you find somebody who's giving you something that's helping you, that's changing your life, that's guiding you in the right direction, and that person gets shut down by one of these big tech companies or some government organization like what Russell Brand is suffering with right now. He's dealing with the attacks of his own government, trying to shut him down, using the big tech companies to shut him down, taking away his funding. And it's just not right. It shouldn't be happening because people have to make a living. People have got to pay their bills. They've got to support a lifestyle. They got to support a family. And it's truly evil what I see going on. The suppression of free speech that happens, and then all of the bombardments of all the lies that we get on top of that. And it's like everybody knows which direction they're taking us in, but we just sit here and watch. We just keep watching, and the band plays on as the Titanic sinks. It can be stressful, and it can be very hard on a person. But I'm going to tell you guys, as long as you keep pushing for the truth, as long as you stick to your guns and say what you mean and mean what you say, we can change things. It's going to take one person at a time, standing up, doing the right things, saying the right things, being able to, men, provide for your families, take care of your children, take care of your wife, take care of your neighbors. Don't let people go without having the knowledge that they are loved and cared for by those who are supposed to be loving and caring for them. We can make a difference. We can break free from the Truman Show dome that we're stuck in.
Sylvia is the only thing that's real in this fake world. It's then later revealed that Truman is obsessed with Fiji as Sylvia is reported to be moving there. Truman then starts to see more and more suspicious things. His radio specifically describes his every move in an apparent malfunction.
Okay, he's making his turn onto Lancaster Square.
Such a good movie.
Truman's also seeing every part of the background set, but he's always escorted away from it. This sequence of events brings his suspicions to a breaking point, as Truman concludes that it seems that his entire world revolves around him in some weird way. Fearing that he's going crazy, he brings up these questions to Marlon, his best friend, who then just tries to brush it all off. And in response to his increased suspicion, Truman's then further barraged by suggestions that everything is just fine, that he's just being weird. His mother then shows fake pictures of him at Mount Rushmore, and even the TV runs a program about the benefits of a small town life. But by now, things don't work like they used to. He's seeing the society that he lives in starts to crack. It's also laughable and ridiculous. This whole thing is a facade. And now that Truman is waking up to this reality, the lullabies of deception can't draw him back to sleep. After noticing that his wife is crossing her fingers in his wedding pictures, Truman follows her to work. Despite multiple attempts by extras to delay and stop Truman from seeing the surgery that his wife is helping with, Truman breaks into the hospital and sees the fake surgery being played out by actors who have no idea what they're doing. Determined to leave, Truman then visits a travel agency. By this point, Truman's had enough. He's determined to leave. He wants to escape this sick society, so he tries to book a flight to Fiji, but the clerk says they're all sold out for at least a month. So then Truman tries to get a bus out, but it conveniently breaks down just before leaving. Truman then, sitting in a car at home, waits for his wife to come back from work. When she does, she gets in the car with him as he points out the clockwork regularity of the people who go past their road. Unsatisfied with her unrealistic reaction to this, Truman then locks the car and takes Meryl on an impromptu road trip. To everyone around him, he seems like he's having a breakdown. He's breaking the rotten habitus surrounding him. But then instantly, traffic jam starts, stopping Truman in his tracks. Truman then pretends to go back home, which disperses the traffic completely, but then turns right around and makes his way out of the suburbs and onto the road. Once they reach the bridge which stands between Truman and the mainland, it seems that his conditioned aquaphobia will stop his escape plan. All the conditioning and propaganda is the only barrier to his freedom. However, Truman overcomes his fears by closing his eyes and forcing Meryl to steer the car while he holds down the accelerator. Once they're over the bridge, other obstacles is set up by Christoph to try and stop Truman from leaving. Truman even drives through a wildfire, but is stopped by a roadblock due to a convenient leak at the nearby power plant. In desperation, Truman tries to get through on foot, but is tackled and subdued by men in hazmat suits, who take him back home. The implausibility of all these events cement Truman's skepticism of the world around him, which brings up the question, how many so-called emergency events in our own world could be equally implausible?
I gotta tell you, just that little clip there, there's been many times I've felt like I was going nuts because of all the things that feel almost like they're not as correlated as that. They're not actors, there's not cars waiting to stop and all those other things. But when you feel like that you're being lied to and you're searching for the truth, and when you dig for it, I'll give you an example. You just go search on Google anything about eating meat and how it works or what the health benefits are or anything like that. You're going to have a real hard time finding anything outside of a handful of YouTube videos unless you stumble across one of the blog sites that some of the carnivore influencers have. And even talking to the new AI that Bard has, I've used it when I was trying to do some research. And I found that initially when I ask questions, it comes back almost like a nurse trying to tell me what's wrong with all I'm doing or even what I'm exploring. And then when I question it about the fact that certain things have been beneficial for people or that there's been studies that have shown where the meat doesn't cause these issues and it actually helps people and how it deals with insulin resistance, or if I directly address how carnivore way of eating has helped, eventually it says, well, yes, I did kind of hide that part, but that's because I didn't want you to be misled. And I'm thinking, what in the world? This is perfect evidence that the people who made this are guiding us in a certain direction that they want us to go. They're not letting you get to the truth. They're letting you get to what they believe the truth is and what they want their truth to be. And that's not a world to live in. And that's the Truman Show we live in.
All the lies told by our media, all the false narratives pushed onto us, all the divisions sowed by algorithms in the news, all these layers of fallacy that have been embedded into every aspect of society. We all have the means to stop this nonsensical fictional reality that we abide by, and yet we choose not to confront it. When anyone does, they are breaking the habitus surrounding them, which threatens the whole house of cards that society is built on, which is why true authentic reality is always outrunning our apprehension. So then how can we ever know the truth when the lens we look through is tainted by a corrupted habitus, tainted by all the models and distractions that we don't even acknowledge? If we can't comprehend true reality, we no longer know what truth is. We don't have a grasp on what our values really are. And it's this flattening of our values, of our society, of our culture that dampens our outrage and emotion. Everything becomes muted by our postmodern reality. In The Truman Show, Truman's deserved outrage at the cage he has been trapped in is never tapped into. He's never angry, instead.
Good evidence of that is all this talk about UFOs, things about aliens and the CIA and governments. And it's not like any of this is hidden. The government is sharing their information on it. They're talking about it. They're like, yeah, we have alien technology. We have alien bodies. And so many of these things that have been talked about in mainstream forums, when people are like, yeah, so okay. So we've met aliens, or they're here. Everybody is so numb to all of the things that have been going on that you could tell them that it was Independence Day and there were ships parked over all the cities, and people would say, well, I'm glad I'm not in that city. Nobody would react like we would have in the past if we realized something like we're realizing. And, it's like we're all waiting for the next crazy thing to happen and say, okay, here we go, because nobody knows exactly what to do. But I'm telling you, it starts with one person at a time, getting to the truth and living the truth in your daily life. It's going to make a difference. The more people who are doing it, the more we're going to break this system. Just like he talks about, once Truman starts to see the cracks in the system, if he doesn't pursue those cracks to figure out what's going on, and even though he's denied access over and over, eventually he breaks free and drives out of the town. Even though he doesn't get to the answers he's looking for, He overcame certain fears that are making him stronger each time, so that as the next time he has a barrier to get around where he knows he's being told a lie, it's going to be easier to overcome that big challenge because he's overcome that one little challenge of dealing with his wife, that over one little challenge of dealing with his best friend, that bigger challenge of dealing with his fear of the water. And as we progress, we become stronger ourselves and we gain knowledge. We learn about the things that are true, and then more and more people who are searching for the truth might start listening to you.
Always left in a state of confusion and distraction. He's meant to feel crazy by searching for the truth. This is because for the show to be successful, it relies on Truman and his belief in the society around him. If he starts questioning this, then society goes down with him. So society has to prevent him from questioning the habitus he is surrounded by. And are we any different? Is this why we live in a culture without soul or value? Where everything we think and do is shrink down by reductionism, where the phenomena of nature, personality, the essence of life is just reduced to statistics and banal labels. Our world is filled with mystery and wonder. It's filled with adventure, but our world is being reduced to nothing more than a banal, monotonous cage, numbing us into this bored, flaccid, apathetic state, which is what the Truman Show tries to show us. Once home, Truman is now feeling like an animal in a cage. His wife, unable to calm him down, offers him some coffee with a less than subtle product placement. Truman immediately senses out the fact that she is performing for someone, and so he confronts her about it. He's starting to reject this ridiculous reality he is surrounded by, and because of this, he seems crazy, which is why then the actor of Truman's wife begins to break character and pulls out a sharpened kitchen utensil to defend herself. It's these sorts of cracks in the show that only happen when Truman stops believing in it. Like in our world, we're now starting to see the rise of political outsiders. We're seeing the rise of extremism and a general apathy of all the people who refuse to believe in our current system.
I don't think anybody's ever told me that somebody pulled a knife on them for trying to tell them about carnivore, but I've had many people tell me that when they try to talk to them about it, that they can react as if they're telling them their God is not real, or they're telling them that their politics are wrong. And it's like, why are you reacting this way? I'm telling you my experience. I'm telling you something that you can physically see has changed. And when you look at the picture of me from 3 years ago, and you look at me now, you can see that I'm a healthier person. Why would you doubt what I'm saying now? But there's going to be people watching this video that are going to say, you're absolutely nuts. Eating red meat every day, eating ribeyes in the morning and in the afternoon, eating carnivore crisps at night dipped in fat. I'll tell you about that one in another video soon. You're going to die, Dante. It's going to kill you. Well, I'm going to tell you, the last 3 years of my life have been the best 3 years of my life because I've been eating this way, and I feel better than I ever have. If this is what dying feels like, then I love it.
Government starting to collapse with war imminent. No one trusts our broken society, and in the case of the Truman Show, it's this unraveling madness that almost ends with Truman's wife revealing her acted role. Only until Truman's lifelong friend Marlon bursts in at the last minute and whisks Truman away to have a heart-to-heart conversation. But at this point, it's like putting a band-aid on a gaping wound. The floodgates are now open, and Truman's belief is dwindling. In this scene, the two are sitting near the river and begin reminiscing. Christoph, through Marlon, reassures Truman that Truman's life has meaning and is normal. He comforts Truman by assuring him that if what Truman believed was real, then everyone would have to be in on it, including him, though this isn't possible as Marlon would never lie. On the surface, Truman seemingly takes this into heart, but deep down he knows that Marlon is just a victim of the game, and so he deliberately shows to him that he bought the ruse. He knows that Marlon isn't a bad person, but that he's not a real person. Morning arrives and Truman seems to be back to his old self. He draws with a bar of soap on in the morning, he has the usual conversations with his neighbors and co-workers, and seems interested in a new office mate he will have next to him. Evening rolls around and everything seems business as usual with Truman fast asleep. However, Christoph senses something is off. Truman fell asleep in the basement rather than his bed, so Marlon is again sent over with a six-pack to investigate and talk Truman back to sense. However, this time he finds that Truman isn't there and has escaped from the house. Christoph calls for all actors to search for Truman, and for the first time in the show's history cuts the transmission. However, even with all the actors searching the entire set, Truman cannot be found. At his wit's end, Christoph has the set illuminated into daylight mode early, and on a hunch, has the team begin looking through the cameras near the harbour and on the boat. After cycling through a few cameras, the team finds Truman aboard a sailboat, and Christoph gives the call to resume transmission. After a few moments of peace sailing, Christoph is then faced with a dilemma. He either continues
dealing with his biggest fear and living his best life. You can see it on his face. He's loving it. He's loving it as he faces this problem. searching for the truth. He's overcome the biggest one he had, and he's making it.
Transmission at risk of Truman finding the truth, or he gets rid of Truman entirely. So he decides to send a violent storm above Truman's boat. Christoph increases the violence of the weather, but after a few long minutes, relents. Amidst this, Truman shows his willingness to die for the truth by shouting to the sky, "Is this the best you've got?" Christoph, in godlike stupor, descends to send the most violent bout of weather yet, all to the dismay of his crew and producer. Truman, however, holds on but is knocked unconscious. But at the last minute, Christoph rescinds the weather and removes the storm, resuming the tranquil waters. Truman regains consciousness and begins sailing his boat again. He has beaten the storm and the sea seems to be in his favor. However, after a few minutes, the bow of Truman's boat launches through the side of the set, leaving a big hole in the sky dome. By now, all of Truman's suspicions have been confirmed, and, in an ecstasy, begins punching the wall. However, the reality of Truman's situation begins to dawn on him as he sees the ramp at the end of the water. Truman walks across this ramp, walking on the water. The audience is gripped. The culmination of his 30 years in the Truman Show seems to be at its finale. Truman locates a staircase and slowly ascends to the side of the set. At the top, he locates the door labeled exit and opens it, revealing the abyss beyond his realm. A godlike voice then thunders through the sky as Christoph reveals that Truman was the star of a TV show with the whole world watching. Truman asks, "Was nothing real?" And in response, Christoph responds that Truman is real, and that's what made him so enjoyable for millions. Christoph then tries to keep Truman in the set by indicating that there was no more truth out in the real world, and that in the world he created for him, he had nothing to fear. The ignorance was bliss. After a few moments of silence, Truman looks up at the camera and says his final words before leaving the show.
Good afternoon, good evening, and good night.
It's Truman's overriding impulse to return to what is real that makes the entire show fall apart. His drive to understand true reality is enough to bring down the false reality he'd been living in. As he goes through the door, this symbolizes Truman taking back control and turning back on a sterile, hollowed out reality. And today, we're in the same process.
Before he goes on with what's going on today, the one thing I will say is that that part where he says, "There's no more reality out there than there is in here. At least in here you're safe." And that kind of parallels to taking the blue pill in the Matrix movie, is that you can stay in the Matrix and you can have your imaginary stake and you can have your imaginary life and you can be happier. But the question is, why would you want to have a fake reality? But so many people are seeking it now through AR, augmented reality, through VR, virtual reality. And these things can be interesting and fun, but they can also be very dangerous if they begin to dominate your lives. It reminds me of, the idea of the movie Surrogates, where Bruce Willis was, living his life and his wife was living their life through androids that they controlled while they were plugged into a machine that I don't remember if they looked like them. I don't think all of them looked like the person that they were, so that they could be whoever they wanted to be. But ultimately, you're just dying in a shell of what you were. You're not living life. You're just having experiences. You're having experiences fed to you, and that's just no way to live. And, one of the things about eating the way I did before is I wanted to do things like that. I spent so much more time engaging in digital entertainment and games and watching television, and so much less time getting out and enjoying life. But I've spent time. I've taken my son and got him certified for scuba, and we've gone scuba diving together, and we've been able to spend time going to the springs, and we go swimming in the springs, and we go kayaking. I spend a lot of time walking and running. We go riding bikes together. These were all things that I did not do before this way of eating. Broke me free from the world that was pulled over my eyes about health and nutrition, and basically just keeping me plugged into the food and health machine that had been created by these corporate entities who run everything in these companies, and that have no interest in actually curing you of anything or healing your body, but keeping you addicted to what they have. It is so freeing. It's like exiting the dome and feeling like you're on the outside. But just like Truman, he doesn't have anything he's familiar with out there anymore. He has to start off fresh. He has to start off new. And a lot of times it feels that way on a carnivore way of eating, like it's you against the world because everybody thinks you're crazy. And that's why it's such a beautiful thing to have this carnivore community we have, whether it's on my Facebook page, Ferrigno Freedom, or my Facebook group that I created as a private group, so we could come together and share our stories and share our successes and encourage one another in a private area where when you share something on that group page, it doesn't get shared with all of your friends. We need each other because we don't have that foundation around us that would be good and healthy for us in a Truman Show environment. Like if we had somebody that was actually nurturing us or trying to help us along to find truth, to find better ways of being healthy and active lifestyles and things that make our lives better. We have that with this community. So I'm so thankful for that. But it is a lot like being alone, because when you have a medical question, you think to yourself, who am I going to ask? Thank God you can go on to Dr. Barry's Monday night live stream and ask questions that he will answer as a family doctor, a medical doctor, a carnivore doctor, somebody who knows what you're doing and what you're dealing with. He can answer those questions. Thank God for him. If it wasn't for him, who would you go to? Because your regular medical doctor is probably not going to be supportive in that way. I happen to be lucky to have one who is more open-minded, but he still isn't one that I could ask questions about an all-meat lifestyle if I had a problem like that. And I get a lot of people that ask me those questions, and I don't always have the answer, but thankfully I have some direction I can give them, whether it's from what I've learned from people like Dr. Barry. You've got the support of so many other people who are in the carnivore community sharing their experience and their stories and what it's healed. So now you get experiential information. Some people would call that anecdotal information. But I'm telling you right now, when you've got thousands of people giving what's called anecdotal information, you have a test group. You have information now that can be used to be a study explaining how switching to an all-meat way of eating has changed everything for thousands of people, and it all seems to be for the better. I don't know of anybody having a change for the worse unless they were doing things that they shouldn't have been doing. I've heard about people who were vegan influencers trying carnivore and then had all these problems. You don't think that's motivated by agenda and ideology? And they want to get back to their audience. You don't think that's motivated by agenda and ideology? It is. Well, anyway, let's finish this up. There's only a few minutes left.
Is Truman taking back control and turning back on a sterile, hollowed-out reality. And today, we're in the same process. The increasingly ridiculousness of our society and the habitus that we're servile to is beginning to crack. With our world, economy, and culture crumbling into the ground, we're seeing a rejection of this tired system. We're seeing new waves of younger generations dropping out of the workforce, rejecting the habitus imposed on them, and millions taking the untrodden path, which is causing society to reach a crossroads. We're faced with a new path because those in control of our reality are now making a new one, a path of metaverses and virtual AI reality to take us astray from our current world, and the other path is a reversion back to what is truly felt. But whichever path we take, our belief in society is falling apart. The cracks are starting to show everywhere you look, and the game is collapsing in on itself. So the question is, where does it go from here?
Definitely a great video for a lot of other reasons than just sharing this carnivore way of eating story. But it definitely relates. I'm sure a lot of you carnivores out there can relate to this. And if you do, I'd love to hear your comments in the description. Tell me if you think this was a good video to review for the purposes of a carnivore way of eating. I know it breaks a little bit from my normal procedure, but it's definitely something that I'm very interested in. And I try to keep my content focused on what I'm doing here. But I know a lot of you are interested in more of what I'm interested in. This is the kind of stuff I'm interested in. I do find it very interesting, and I do like understanding how and why things happen and who's doing what and saying what, and being able to weave around the lies so that I can maneuver my life in a way that is going to be more real and less fake than what we have been exposed to for so long. Well, anyway, that's all I got for this one, guys. I appreciate you for watching. Stick around for a minute. You can take a look at some information about Redmond salt. They got some great deals for the holidays, and I'll see you guys next time.
If we pay extra, could we maybe get some grease or fat?